It was a gloomy afternoon in the small town of Willowbrook. The air was thick with sorrow as friends and family gathered at the old church for the funeral of Mr. Thomas, a well-loved community member known for his kindness and generosity. The church, usually filled with joy and song, was now silent save for the soft sobbing of mourners. Among the attendees was Mr. Thomas's faithful dog, Max, a golden retriever who had been his constant companion for over a decade. Max sat by the coffin, his head resting on his paws, eyes filled with sadness. Everyone knew how deeply Max loved his owner, and his presence at the funeral touched the hearts of many. As the priest, Father Gabriel, began the service, the atmosphere grew even more somber. He spoke about Mr. Thomas's life, his contributions to the community, and the legacy of kindness he left behind. But as he reached the part of the sermon meant to bring comfort, a strange thing happened. Max lifted his head and began barking. At first the bark was soft, almost like a plea, but it quickly grew louder and more insistent. The mourners were startled, exchanging nervous glances. Dogs sometimes behaved oddly at funerals, sensing the mood, but this felt different. Max wasn't just barking aimlessly. He seemed focused on the coffin, almost as if he was trying to tell them something. Father Gabriel tried to continue, but the barking persisted, echoing off the walls of the church. Finally, one of the men in the congregation, Mr. Harold, stood up. Harold was an old friend of Thomas and had always been skeptical about the afterlife and spiritual matters. Harold: "Father, why is the dog barking like that? Does he sense something we don't?" Father Gabriel's face turned pale, his fingers tightening around the edges of the pulpit. He glanced at the coffin, then at Max, his nervousness evident. "Father Gabriel, dogs often sense things, emotions, but it's nothing to be alarmed about." But Harold wasn't convinced. "Harold, with all due respect, Father, Max seems to be trying to tell us something specific. Maybe we should take a closer look." The room grew tense. The idea of disturbing a coffin at a funeral was unsettling, but Max's persistent barking made it difficult to ignore. Father Gabriel hesitated for a moment before nodding reluctantly. "Father Gabriel, very well, let's check." A few men, including Harold, moved toward the coffin. Max stopped barking and stood up, wagging his tail slightly as if encouraging them. Slowly they lifted the lid. Gasps filled the room as everyone leaned forward, their eyes widening at the sight before them. Inside the coffin, Mr. Thomas's hands were not folded peacefully as they should have been. Instead they were clenched into fists, his face bearing a strained expression that was not there before. More startlingly, there was a faint but distinct sound, a soft tapping like something knocking against the wood. Father Gabriel's nervousness turned into panic. "Father Gabriel, I don't understand. This is not possible." Harold, however, remained calm. "Harold, there's a chance, a small chance that Mr. Thomas isn't actually—" He couldn't bring himself to finish the sentence. Instead, he leaned in closer, placing his ear to the side of the coffin. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. "Harold, quick, get it open!" The men fumbled with the coffin, finally managing to lift the inner lid. What they found left everyone speechless. Mr. Thomas's eyes fluttered open, and he took a shallow, wheezing breath. The church erupted in chaos, people shouting and scrambling to call for help. Max barked again, but this time it was a joyful bark, his tail wagging furiously. Against all odds, Mr. Thomas was alive, saved from a premature burial by his loyal dog. The ambulance arrived swiftly, and Mr. Thomas was rushed to the hospital, where doctors confirmed that he had been in a state of suspended animation, a rare medical condition that made him appear dead. Without Max's intervention, he might never have been saved in time. Father Gabriel, now visibly shaken, approached Harold as they watched the ambulance drive away. "Father Gabriel? Oh, I don't know how to explain this, but perhaps Max knew something we couldn't comprehend." Harold nodded, placing a hand on Max's head, rubbing his fur. "Harold, sometimes, Father, faith and instinct come from unexpected places. Max saved him, and that's all that matters." Word of Max's heroic act spread quickly through Willowbrook, and he became a local hero, his loyalty and instinct celebrated by everyone. Mr. Thomas made a full recovery and lived many more years, always grateful for the dog who refused to let him go too soon. Max continued to be his steadfast companion, and the bond between them grew even stronger, testament to the unbreakable connection between humans and their dogs.